session, and we started with the Venice Biennale in general, some history, and then this year's theme, The Milk of Dreams. Then in the next session, we looked at the national pavilions and some of the politics around them, and we dived into the American pavilion. And today we're getting to the Israeli pavilion, and we're doing a little bit of a different journey with the Israeli pavilion. We're going through history first, and then arriving to today. And I had so much fun, like digging gems for you. I discovered so many new things. I've been texting some artists and curators in the last few days with these questions. So you're basically going with me on a journey of stuff that until like 4 days ago, I didn't even know. So there's a lot of new exciting, not the only that I didn't know, I've been in conversation with some Israeli artists, and it's like it's like connecting new dots. So it's really cool. And we're going to be doing that together and arriving all the way to today. I'm going to share the screen. It's going to start with my desktop because we're moving between slideshow and videos today. So let me just make sure this goes up. Okay, so the Israeli pavilion in the Venice Biennale was built in 1952 by a very prominent modernist Israeli architect, Ze'ev Rechter. Israel actually exhibited in the Biennale from 1948, and it was allocated a space in the Biennale. That was the year after World War II, where there were new changes, moves, and new nationalities adding pavilions, kind of the last time that buildings were built in the Giardini. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, you can go and watch our first session, but it's okay if you jumped in over here. It's a modernist building. You can see the very humble kind of facade. The building that is raised in front on these little pillars is very reminiscent of Tel Aviv architecture at that time, modernist, Bauhaus or international architecture. And it's standing at the kind of side of the American pavilion, which we'll get to and we'll see later in this presentation. So it was built in 1952. By the way, it's also the year when the Egyptian pavilion was built. So many changes throughout that year. And what I want to start by showing you is actually this movie, one of the gems I found from this is a documentation of the 1976 Israeli pavilion with artist Danny Caravan, who passed away just this year. A very prominent Israeli artist who his pavilion in 1976 like got the attention of the whole world. Many people said that was a really poor biennale and the only reason to go there was the Israeli pavilion. And this video is actually all in Hebrew. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to play it, but I'm going to mute it, and I'm going to kind of give you the pointers of what he's saying and what's going on. But it will also, he's talking a little bit about the model and the process of the Biennale itself. So it kind of, we get some images that really I couldn't find anywhere else. Really amazing historical images. So I'm going to play, and I'll give just a moment of the sound just so you hear the music of his voice before I mute and talk over it.
נולדתי על חולות של חופי הים התיכון, ברגליי יחפות קפתי לראשונה את הצורות. העקבות שהשארתי בחול היו התבליטים הראשונים שלי, אור השמש גילה אותן. אני מקדיש ביתן זה לשלום, שלום בין ישראלים וערבים.
So basically, this is a beginning. He talks about growing up, being born, growing up in Israel, going through the sands, and the sands and the place that his feet left in the sand were almost his first like reliefs, the beginning of his sculptures. And he dedicates his pavilion to peace between Jews and Arabs, or he actually says between Israeli and Arabs. Here, what we're seeing is him describing a sculpture that was actually placed at the entrance of the Giardini, of the Biennale Gardens. This isn't yet the Israeli pavilion. It's a one-time thing that any nationality got to present a sculpture at the entrance of the gardens. It was meant as this type of playground. You can see the model here. It's in white to resemble the White City. It takes its shapes from the modernist culture and from the local culture. You can see here a moment. You can see here the model that he's describing. I just don't want it to be, one moment. Okay. He's describing the model. He put there two olive trees with at the facade with a water canal connecting them, and there was a text saying our borders should be olive trees. And inside the pavilion, he basically built the three floors of the pavilion, which is also a unique thing to the Israeli pavilion. It's, I think, the only one with 3 floors, 2 major ones and 1 middle one. And you can see he built it all into this architectural plane that plays kind of reminiscent of sundials. It uses also the sun, but the whole exhibition is actually what happens when you walk through this architectural space. I'm gonna skip a little forward. You can see here the water going here. I'm gonna skip forward because I want you to see some of the images. One moment. Let's see where I can find them. Talking. He's basically also talking about how lonely this process is and not receiving the help that he needed. And here we can see how it works to bring things to the Biennale, because actually what's most expensive for artists at the Biennale is not shipping the works to Italy, but getting them to Venice. And this is how it works. You can see the olive tree, you can see the architectural pieces that were constructed by the artist and another artisan in Bologna, and then brought like this to the Biennale. He does speak of this as being one of his most amazing experiences. And this is, I mean, to me, it's amazing to see this footage from 76 and realize how it's done. And this is actually also how it's done these days. There is no flying in of artwork. So whatever monumental artwork you've seen with me in the last 2 lectures, it was brought in by boat to the Biennale. So a pretty amazing thing. I'm just going to see if there's, I want you to see a few more images. I think, okay, we'll stop this. He does talk a little bit about being shocked at, he was exhibiting alongside these amazing international artists, feeling very small, wanting to represent Israel. And then he was basically getting most of the attention from that year. He went along, I'll just mention about Danny Caravan, to being one of the most renowned Israeli sculptors and landscape sculptors with works all across the world. So he's another kind of someone to think of. And actually, I will say about this presentation, I chose him. We're going to see something from 78, from 80, and then we're going to skip all the way to 2011. So it's kind of, we're not going through a full historical review of this, but rather I wanted to give you some of the pivotal moments and an understanding of what's going on here. So Kadishman, I'm assuming many of you heard of Kadishman, the painter with the sheep, but actually the beginning of the sheep, if you've ever seen his paintings, was in the Venice Biennale of 1978. The theme of the Biennale, it was hard to find, but from texts I read, it seems it was about going back to nature. And basically he created a live installation and he turned the whole Israeli pavilion into a live pen for sheep. So he brought 17 sheep. They were also painted with that blue paint. And Kadishman actually was both shepherd and an artist, and he merged those into the Biennale work, which also obviously got a lot of press. And you can see here the name of the curator, Amnon Barzel, who was the curator also in the previous one. He's a very prominent, now I think he's 87 years old, Israeli curator, and he was appointed to curate the Israeli pavilion in the Biennale from 76 for 6 years. That's why we're going to see his name appearing again and again. The process has changed since, but at that time there was a curator appointed and he chose the artists. So a very powerful person. However, I will say, even though this all goes under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Arts and Culture, the funds that are given to it are very, very small. Artists, I know some who ended up bankrupt after exhibiting in the Venice Biennale. And actually in the previous video, Danny Caravan kind of ends by saying, we became a country of sports rather than culture, because all the money goes to the sports. And I almost couldn't complete this because of lack of funds and support. So this is true since 76. And still, if you listen to artists today talking about it, it's still going on. We're moving to a very unique exhibition that was held in 1980. The artists exhibiting in that year were not only Moshe Gershuni, Micha Ullman, another Israeli artist, exhibited too in this Biennale, but actually the installation that Moshe Gershuni created was so provocative, outrageous, pivotal, that it's kind of almost everything you kind of get from the Biennale of that year. You can see here, it's called Red Sealing. That's not a spelling mistake. It's sealing in terms of to seal. And what happened was Moshe Gershuni arrived at the Biennale and the building was in a really, really bad state. It wasn't maintained well, possibly also with what was ever left from the sheep and Menashe Kadishman from 2 years ago. And what he started was to seal all the cracks with red, very, very thick paint. And Gershuni came to the Venice Biennale with this notion of it being part of Europe, and as not only an Israeli, but also as a Jew coming to Europe. And you can see it looks like a crime scene, and this is what it felt like. And you can see here in the other photos of the installation, and literally these are the photos that exist. Like there's not that there's better photos of this installation. And you can see here these two German words, okay, doch and noch, which mean loosely translated still and yet, okay? And Gershuni kind of brings into the Biennale back what it is to be a Jewish on European land, the German connection, and a very, very political one. If you think of Danny Caravan's message that was very Israeli, it was calling for peace and it was talking about Israelis and Arabs. Gershuni here brings something that is based totally on his Jewishness. And I will also say, it shifted also his own practice from there onwards. So in the same way Kadishman's work in the Biennale shifted his practice, it's true for Gershuni, and it's very interesting to see that these works are pivotal not only as part of the Venice Biennale, but also for the artists that are exhibiting there. Okay, so we're skipping all the way to the 21st century. And I'll also say here that what I'm showing you, because I skipped between things and my choices kind of, you know, there's so much to choose from. I chose based on what I was interested in, what I liked, and what I thought would give you kind of an understanding of how the things function. I will say that before the 70s, most of the Israeli shows, and this is true for many of the pavilions, weren't a one-man or one-woman's show. It was group shows, kind of showing the wealth of art in the country. And if you remember, I mentioned that also in our previous lecture about the national pavilions, that very often the ones that are younger countries or new to exhibit have group exhibitions to show more or expose more of their country, whereas the established pavilions very often choose one person and kind of it's this huge show. So here we're looking at 2011, with representing the Israel in the Venice Biennale is Sigalit Landau. You can see here the curators. So just a few words about how this works, because nowadays there's a committee. You can submit as a curator, you can submit as an artist, you can submit as an artist and a curator together. You submit to the committee and then go through the process and get an approval. So the curators don't necessarily have to be Israeli or Jewish, okay? There are a lot of complaints about the committee. We'll get to it a little later when we get to today. You can see here the Biennale theme. So every Biennale has a theme, and then the national pavilions are sometimes very much connected to the theme, sometimes not, but I think it's interesting to have that in mind. You can see here illuminations with also a play on the word nations, and you can see here that Sigalit is also using the building itself. So you see here on the side of the building, those of you who were with me previous lecture might recognize here the back of the Hungarian pavilion, that beautiful building I showed you. And you can see here on the building, one man's floor is another man's feeling. Again, not a mistake. That's the name of the exhibition here on the building. And you can also see here at the entrance, can you see here? This, which is actually part of the installation. Okay, so these pipes are part of the installation. We'll see them in a moment as we enter the pavilion. Okay, so you can see here the name, and you can see the size of the pipes here. And Sigalit Landau is basically in this exhibition dealing with earth, water, and salt, which is something that kind of goes throughout her works until today. And she transforms the entire first and major level of the pavilion into this place of pipes and water. And think of it, especially in Venice, when where the waters are going through the canal, and what's purified and what is contaminated and how does it work. And actually, she also exposed a part of the pavilion itself that was closed off and had some water pipes in it. And it was what was going through here were salt waters purified into sweet water. So it was also functional in this way. For any of you who visited Israel, this might be a familiar sight with us having these on the sides of the building with the water clocks and everything. So she's bringing in kind of the Israeli architecture from the back view of it, not the facade, but what's behind. And you can see here the stairs going to the second level. In the second level, there was almost nothing, only this coming up the stairs and this video installation of shoes that went through a few processes. First of all, they were immersed in the Dead Sea, which is something she still does, and then they're crystallized with salt. And then they were immersed in the Dunst River in Poland, where they accumulated ice. Okay, so you can see kind of moving from Israel, the Dead Sea, the Mediterranean to Poland, giving them another coat. And then they were filmed here in the snow in Poland, basically slowly melting the ice off and revealing the crystallized shoes. We'll see the shoes in a moment. And I'm not interpreting much at this point. You'll receive a lot of links of further reading if you want, but I also think there's something special about just seeing the art and seeing what it evokes in you and how you feel about seeing all of these things side by side. In the middle floor, which was basically, you can see it from above, so you can see here the photo, was this table with all these computers. There was a debate going on. You could sit here and listen to the audio. But on the computer screens, in all of them, what you were seeing was a video of this girl sitting under the chairs, under the table you're actually sitting on there, tying shoes together and then leaving. So this whole question of what happens above the table, below the table, what are our discussions, how are we connected? And I think shoes, especially for Jewish people and with memory of the Holocaust, it's very hard not to connect shoes in that direction. They're in so many ways a standing for absent human beings. And at the back side of the pavilion, you can see here, this is the exit. These windows are closed. We're going to see them in a variety of ways soon to allow for the video, is this sculpture installation with shoes made of bronze. 12 of them, as in the 12th tribe, standing there outside. So that was Sigalit's exhibition in a very kind of condensed way. We're going to move forward, and what I'm going to try and do is now, as we move through the years, I'm also going to try and give you a feel of the pavilion itself and some of the things that were happening in there. So first of all, you can see over here, we moved to 2015, and maybe some of you can recognize this is the edge of the American Pavilion. So this is how close it is, and it's not by chance, meaning the fact that the Israeli Pavilion in 1952, I mean, inaugurated in 1952, things started a little earlier, is built in like the backyard or adjacent to the American Pavilion is not by chance. There's a lot of that of where the things are fitting, and basically this is space that did belong to the American Pavilion. So they needed to say yes, and they obviously had an interest in allowing Israel to have a pavilion, and this is how close it is. You'll see it in more photos soon. But you can see what happened to this pavilion in 2015 with artist Tzibi Geva. And the title of his exhibition was Archaeology of the Present. The Biennale theme, as you can see here, is all the world's futures. So it's an interesting play on that. And Tzibi Geva basically brings hundreds of tires from Israel. Now, if you remember Danny Caravan and the boats, you know what it means to bring all of this from Israel into Venice, and covers the building with these tires. Again, it's a facade which is very evocative. It's hiding the building, but it's making it extremely present in another way. It's bringing the Israeliness, if we think of tires, of burning tires, of moving forward, of protecting, but also creating this armor. All of this comes up in his installation. And you can see this is the back side of the building where we just saw Sigalit's shoes. So everything is covered in tires, and you can imagine in the Giardini, just to see this space covered like this it's a very powerful thing. And here you have another view, and even some tires left over here. As we enter, we see what he was doing, because basically Tzibi, in this installation, we have also some of his very large scale paintings. This is the lower level. And also what he did was bring a ton of junk from Israel that was installed in this way behind bars in the pavilion, as well as these windows that are very, very quintessentially Israeli, I would say. The trisim, you don't really have them here in America, but they're very, very common in Israel. And you can see the beauty here also of constructing this grid. It's not so easy. We'll see here, you can see how tall it goes. So it's from the middle level all the way to the upper level. When you're in the pavilion, you're actually getting light in, but you're kind of encased in those tires. And in case you haven't noticed by now, a lot of what TV is creating here is that feeling of blockage, right? Of border, of blockage, of something that is almost suffocating, but still there's a possibility to see through it. So I'd say in this way, very much talking about Israeli politics, about what it is to be within this country and be part of it, and the borders of it. And you can see here a very interesting thing. One moment. Because he coated the building with these tires. So the building, every pavilion has basically the name of the nation, usually in English and in Italian. Yeah, so they have the name, but because he coated the building with the tires, they basically hide the name. I don't know if you can see it, would be here. So what he did over here, he with spray paint, in graffiti, he recreated the signage in, if you can see here, it's written Israel in the Italian form of writing it. So he put that, one moment, I want to go back and I wanted to show you something, because one of the things, and this is what I was saying, that I was going through conversations with some artists, because if you remember in the first photo, there was a pole with a flag next to the pavilion. Just so, we're going to do this really, really quickly. Can you see a pole and a flag, right? It's there. And then I came to see this and I was like, where's the pole and where's the flag and what's going on? And then I went on this adventure for the last 2 days through archives and photos looking for what happened to the pole and the flag, and then basically deciding, okay, I'll just write Tzibi and I'll ask him what happened. So Tzibi answered. He's a very nice human being. And it's really interesting. Basically, the pole and the flag were there, but because he covered the whole building with tires and he really saw the building as part of, it's already the art itself, he didn't want the pole there to disturb. And the other thing, he felt that so much of what he's doing is leaning towards the bunker, the blockage, the war. Having there a flag will make it will become too much, and he wanted it down. He didn't want the flag over there. It got him into quite a quarrel with then Ministry of Culture Miri Regev. So there was a whole big issue, which, by the way, he didn't say, but I then asked another artist, and we'll get to what happened to the pole in a couple of years, and I got the rest of the story. So the pole and the flag went down for this exhibition. I will say that not all pavilions have their flags on, and actually, for instance, the American pavilion this year, again, and I suspect it's once again because of having the whole facade as part of the installation, doesn't have a flag on it, okay? So it's not unique only to Israel. This happens with various nationalities, and very often it just depends on the art or the artist or what they're looking to do. To me, it was fascinating, so I started trying to kind of understand what's going on there. So we're moving back through this work by Tzibi, and we're getting now to 2017 to a work at the exhibition by Gal Weinstein. You can see the title, Sun Stands Still. And I don't know, for those of you who know your Bible, it comes Shemesh begiv'on dom ve'yareach be'emek ayalon. Sun stands still in the valley, in Giv'on, and the moon in the valley of Ayalon. And it's basically Joshua kind of asking God to stop everything so that he can win the war. And Gal Weinstein chooses the beginning of this sentence about stopping time for his exhibition. And when you walk here, this is the first level of the pavilion. When you walk in, basically, there is no object, but what you're seeing is all on the walls and on the floor. And what you're seeing here that might look like a print, you'll see in a moment, is not. This is already from the upper floor. Gal creates these large-scale paintings from mold and steel wood and all these weird materials that are carefully crafted together. Now, even though the title of the exhibition is Sun Stands Still, the place where the second half of the sentence appears is actually in this large work where the moon appears here. As you go up the stairs, you can see these ornamental paintings on the wall. They're all created with mold, okay? He actually works with mold. And again, in Venice, it's a very powerful thing to work with, where everything kind of is with the water and what the water does. And the pavilion also had a very, very strong smell to it because of the mold and because of a few other materials that we're going to see in a moment. But you can see the object in a way is absent, and you're left with what seems like time that stood still and started this decay, which actually then starts new forms of life, right? Because what if is mold, if not a new form of life? Going upstairs, this is in the upper balcony of the pavilion, is the only object. This is huge, like it's way larger than, I mean, you can see it goes all the way up to the ceiling. This cloud that looks as if it's come from an explosion. You can see the name of this cloud, El Al, which maybe you know from the Israeli airline, but El Al also actually means going above and beyond, or towards towards the upper, el towards al, beyond or above. And you can see here, it turns into a kind of rocket. So this weird kind of afterworld, like it looks like an explosion in this world of mold and decay. And then in the middle level, looking from above, we see this piece, which you couldn't walk on, you could just see it from above. And this piece is called Jezreel Valley in the Night. So Gal Weinstein grew up in Jezreel Valley in the north of Israel, and he works a lot with these images of the north of the agricultural land. But what you're actually seeing here is coffee, black coffee with mold. So basically, and this a lot of Israeli artists know from their studios, in the studio, we usually don't have like good coffee. We just drink black or Turkish coffee. And then I must say, most of us are too lazy to wash the cups until all of the cups are like taken with the sediment of the black coffee that sits there for quite a while, and it grows this mold. So I don't think there's any Israeli artist that isn't familiar with this phenomena that happens tiny in their cup in the studio, really. I mean, I know it sounds disgusting, but it's like, it's really like, you could see it. I mean, maybe not if you come and visit, because people would clean if you come and visit, but as long as you're like not announcing, you'll probably see that cup of coffee in every studio. But Gal takes it wondrously and geniusly to the totally next level. And as he looks at these cups of coffee, he sees them in a way, if you look in an aerial view at night, right? And you can see suddenly the beauty of this if we think of them as land at night with the stars. And this is actually coffee with mold that is poured into molds of styrofoam. So it's modeled after shape of part of agricultural land in the Jezreel Valley. And in the Biennale, you can see here, you could only see it from above. You couldn't walk into it. So he's creating this experience that is very total, where you're looking at landscapes that are created by all these molds, talking about time standing still, and creating a very, very physical experience, just because also the smell is so potent. So that was Gal Weinstein. Maybe it's a moment, you see, I put again a blank slide so that we have a breathing moment. It's like a palate cleanser in a meal, right? So we can kind of take in the images we just saw before moving to the next image. And I will say, I mean, really, we could talk about each of these artists and these projects for a full hour, but I think it's very special to get kind of the bits and pieces and piece together what the pavilion is. So we're seeing here the work from 2019. Can you notice the poll is back? Which led me to text Avi Lubin yesterday at his night, like, what's going on? What was with the poll? Can you tell me what was going on? So Avi Lubin was the curator. Aya Ben Ron is the artist for this exhibition. Oh, why did it go? Here we are. For this exhibition. Field Hospital X, they actually created it as a foundation that still exists. And we'll go through it in a moment, and then I'll come back to the poll. I wasn't at the Venice Biennale, but this year, this whole project was exhibited again in Israel in the Israel Museum in Tel Aviv, the Land of Israel Museum in Tel Aviv, which often happens where whatever is exhibited in the pavilion usually will then have an exhibition in Israel in some format so that people can experience it. So I wanted to just show you, and I'll be sending all of this. FHX is an international institution committed to promote awareness of social injustice through art. So you can see this exhibition from the get-go has like a completely different feel to it. Oh, one thing I wanted to say, and I forgot to mention back. Okay, can you see the Biennale theme of 2019, May You Live in Interesting Times, which is actually a quote, but it became this crazy thing because just after this COVID erupted, so like everyone was like, what a curse were we left with? So just to mention that. And in Field Hospital X, basically, once you came to the pavilion, you needed to take a number and sit in the waiting room. You took a number. This is the artist, Aya Ben-Ron. This is one of the women kind of working there in the reception area. And you can see it feels like a hospital, right? Very pristine. You would take a number and then sit at the reception and hear what's going on and what's going to happen to you in this hospital. All the people acting are well-known artists. Victoria Khana is a well-known vocal artist and singer in Israel, and she was doing this. And after you waited for a while, you were taken to different stations. These are images actually from the way it was exhibited in Tel Aviv. We'll have here a mix of those images. The first stop were these rooms where they were kind of, you can see here, chambers with a kind of very, very thick sponge where you could go in, the door was closed, you had instructions on the video, but basically the instructions were telling you how to release a shout or a yell, and it's sealed so that no one hears you from outside. So kind of you're invited to allow your aggression out in those chambers. You have there some time to do that. Then you move to this space where you can choose between three kind of videos to watch. It's called Care Kits. You choose in the first pavilion, and then you have a kind of band on your hand, and the people then know which video to put for you. And you can see it feels like everyone is in this kind of hospital. The three videos, one was by an Israeli artist living in Berlin. Her name is Victoria Chefetz, or Victoria Chefetz. She's transgender, and the movie is about her life as transgender and the transition. Another movie was about the whole issue of the abduction of Yemen children in Israel in the 50s, with interviews of two of the mothers. And if I'm saying here a ton of information you never knew about, that's okay. A lot of this was also about bringing to the surface issues, social issues that aren't necessarily talked about. And the third movie was by an anonymous Palestinian artist. Why anonymous? Because no Palestinian artist will want to show in the Israeli pavilion under their name because of so many like political issues around it. I will say that since the pavilion, there have been added more movies to this care kit with more issues. So by the time I went to see this in Tel Aviv, there was also a movie about migrant workers in Tel Aviv. There were other things. So kind of the opening to social issues is growing. And at the end of each of these movies, there are two opinions. There are two professionals giving counter opinions about what you just saw. So that's the next one. And then before you leave, I mean, there's another room, there's a group room you can choose if to go in or not, where there's a movie by the artist Aya Ben-Ron about her own experiences, mainly with sexual abuse. Which I didn't bring for us here. And at the end, there are these booths where you go in and you answer a questionnaire that is mainly geared to kind of, I'd say, self-reflect about, am I a victim or am I an aggressor? So you're kind of standing there alone. They take the statistics, but they don't take your name. So it's anonymous, but it's kind of weighing between aggressor and victim. So it's a very intense experience, and also a very brave one by the artist and curator to have people, like if you wanted to take part in the experience and you're in the Biennale, you had to take a number and actually wait. So not everyone will do that. So it's an interesting choice. And I'm going back for a moment to the poll. So the poll came back, as you can see, also in a little of a better shape. But what we're seeing above, there's no flag. So I asked Avi, but why no flag? And he basically said, listen, we have the banner and we chose the blue and white. And if we had also, and it's like a Field Hospital X, the whole idea is that it's like beyond nations. We did choose the blue and white. Having the flag would just be like way beyond, plus not everyone has the flag, so we decided like we're not going to put it there. There's a question here from Barbara Kraus. What was the Palestinian movie about? It actually garnered a lot of very harsh commentary, because it's basically a man with a kind of horse mask and he's masturbating. So you're looking at the screen and it's very close and you're going through that, and that's very intense and not necessarily pleasant. So a very harsh one. I'll find some articles and hopefully there'll be a few in English and I can send them to you, not with the images, but with the conversation that brought with it. So a very, I'd say a very interesting project to create, and actually FHX as a foundation is still ongoing and looking to bring social justice in that way and creating that conversation. I think going through it myself, what I actually appreciated was that I got to choose which of these movies I'm going to see, and I got to choose into which spaces I go and which not. So even though it's a very intense and some would say aggressive experience, at every point of the way, they give me as a viewer a choice of what I want to experience and what I want to say, okay, that's too much for me, I'm not going in there. And I think to me, that might have been one of the most powerful things about this exhibition, of giving so much choice. Because if you think of it, when we go into a hospital, what's almost taken from us at the get-go is our choice, like where we go, how we're treated, like everything is like someone else's decisions. And I think in this space, the fact that they were giving the viewer the choice at every point of the way was very powerful. I'm just looking at times. Okay, we're okay, but I want to move forward. And we're arriving here at the pavilion this year by Ilit Azoulay. What, did I not put her name? Okay, of all the people, I think I was so rushed in so many things. Okay, Ilit Azoulay, we'll talk about the name of the her exhibition in a moment, but you can see here, first of all, it's clear how close the American and Israeli pavilions are, right? So they're really side by side. You can see here what remained from the previous time. So the pole is still there with this nice gold thing at the top. The flag did not reappear. I think very often these things are just like, what happens, happens. Avi said, for instance, during their year that no one was really bothering because it was the year that the Eurovision was happening in Israel and the Ministry of Culture was too busy with other things to even bother about what was going on in the Biennale. The Eurovision, for those of you who don't know, is the world's largest music contest. It does include America. It doesn't include America, but it includes all the European countries, Israel, Scandinavian countries, and Israel hosted it in 2019. So it was such a big deal that Avi said no one was really bothered about what happened with our pavilion. So you can see here the pole stayed, and usually the entrance is from here, right? That's what we've been seeing. But what Ilit did, she diverted the whole entrance. So we enter from the back stairs, and we'll talk soon also about what she did to the building, because if any of you can see, this is the back of the building. We can see the windows are now exposed, and this doesn't look part of Bauhaus International style, right? And this also wasn't there. So all these interventions with the space are part of her work. And she coins for this work a new word, and she finds parallels to it in both English and Arabic. And you can see here Queendom or Malkut, which is, I think actually Queendom is a very good translation for it. So you go in and you see this. Again, this area, and these aren't usually there. And I don't know if you can see, it gives a feeling, a very Israeli casual feeling within the Giardini. I mean, I was sitting there and chatting with a friend, and it feels as if you're in a backyard in Tel Aviv suddenly. This is what it looks like from inside. And what Ilit does, she's a kind of research photography artist, and her works come from very deep research. And she happened upon the oh my God, his family name is Rice. I can't believe I didn't put it here. You will get all the full information in the follow-up email, and he's an Austro-British Jewish art historian, and he had a very large and extensive photo collection of artifacts from the Islamic world that were moved kind of throughout the continents, many of them going through Venice, ended up in museums all over the Western world. But the photographic archive, which is extremely extensive and a very, very high quality, is in the Islamic Museum in Jerusalem. And Ilit goes to this archive and starts kind of playing with that treasure to create this installation. Now, what I'm going to do with you now is I'm going to talk about the installation and how it's in the pavilion and what we're seeing, and then we're going to peep at kind of a way to understand it through her own website. So walking into the pavilion, we have this space. She coated, if you remember the pillars, they were just straight pillars. You can see here, she coats them in blue velvet, ultramarine velvet, but also gives them this more oriental shape. And by transitioning the entrance of the pavilion from its usual space to the back space, she basically moved it from west to east. Okay, so what Ilit is trying to do is kind of create a new type of history, Eastern rather than Western, female or feminine rather than masculine. And she takes the photos of this archive, and you know how in archaeology we try and piece things together, so she takes them apart to recreate new stories. Okay, so we have these huge panels kind of walking around that look very archaeological in nature, telling these very complicated stories. And one of the things especially that happened to me, it's like the images are beautiful, but I have no way to decipher them. It's very, very tough. They're full of details. There's a ton of text to read. It's very beautiful, but it kind of left me very distant and cold. The blue and white here is appearing again. And what I want to do, one moment, I want you to see kind of, this is the text. So she details in the text all the different elements that appear in here, because she basically took apart the photos. She changed the gender of some of the images that appeared in the photos. She took more photos of silver and metal artifacts, and then created these very, very elegant photo montages that are beautiful, but very hard to decipher. So what I want to do with you for a moment, and you'll get this, but I want you to see, actually, one moment, there's a website that is kind of accompanying this exhibition. And when I found it, it was fascinating, because it feels to me like this whole project of hers works way better online than it does in the pavilion. So in the pavilion, I was enjoying the shift she did from west to east and the architectural elements and the name that she created, but the works themselves, it was a little too much to understand and to go through. And here you can see, as I go over with the mouse, I can go to different parts of this and get a lot of information just based on where I am. So what I want to do for you for a moment, I pulled up just the initial text of the image description. We're not going to hear all of it, but it will give you an understanding of it. And obviously, since you'll get all the links for this, you'll be able to view it at home. And really, in this case, I must say, I think it's better online than in the physical world, which is kind of a sad thing to say about an exhibition. But really, I think this website is amazing. So we're just going to listen to a minute before I show you a few more things.
At first glance, the elongated panel looks like a mysterious treasure map. Enclosed within the odd raked edges, there is a mysterious space, both physical as well as imaginary, that is to be discovered by taking a closer look. Thus, the viewer is invited to step closer and walk along the panel while letting his or her gaze fly over the work in its entirety. So in order to, in the next step, engage more intensely with the individual elements and details.
So you can see why I really liked the website. And it was much easier for me to engage with this exhibition online than it was when I was physically in this space. Another thing that was happening in the space was actually a sound piece created by a Palestinian artist or channeler, Maysoon Karaman. Also here, you have the sound, so you'll be able to read and hear the sound. I'll just play a few seconds so you understand what the soundscape of the pavilion was. So if that was undecipherable to you, it's because it's undecipherable. It's not that there's something you missed. It was actually, that was the case in the pavilion itself. And I must say that for me, you know, I'm not the only one. There are a lot of critiques about this installation. Many are saying that it suffered from the committee going so far, like not having enough time. And so she actually only had 6 months to put all of this together, which is crazy because usually, I mean, artists have over a year at least, if not more, to work on the pavilion. I don't know. I think she's a brilliant artist, and this project somehow works better online, even though there's something very beautiful and sensual about the blue and the gold and the silver and the white, but it somehow is left a little bit cold. And I want to end before we open, and I'll leave 3 minutes for questions with this, because this is an architectural piece that was added for the exhibition as part of her work, because, you know, international style buildings don't have these types of arches. So they were added here with a wall piece mural created by Ilit Azoulay, who's a great artist and happens to be Ilit's brother, maybe a foot. Yeah. So he created a beautiful work over here. And it was really interesting because I think for most people, they had no idea that this is another part of the piece, that for anyone that does know Israeli architecture very well, it was an interesting one. I was knocking on it to see where the plaster starts and where the building ends. And you can see, I mean, I was quite fascinated by this gap, I'd say, between the original building and the arch that was added. And to me, it kind of symbolized also, you know, the gap sometimes between what the artist is trying to do and what does come across for the viewer. Last image, just a beautiful view. It makes it very, very clear how this is an add-on, which is beautiful and actually a very powerful sculptural object. Same as on the one hand, putting these very Israeli stools to sit on, but also adding this European fountain in the garden and really transforming the space. And so to me, in many ways, the outer part of her exhibition was more powerful than what was going on inside. So, yay, we did it.
Thank you, Shirel. Thank you so much. Wow. So interesting. As somebody that I visited a few times in the Biennale, and I've seen the pavilion each trying to transform into something else, into a different exhibition. It is pretty special to have a pavilion, which is also beautifully laid out. The proportions within the pavilion itself architecturally are very beautiful. So each time it's taken over by an artist. I do have a question, and I see also that Tali has a question.
Sure,
so maybe we'll
fine.
take Tali's first, and then we can go back to me this morning.
Okay, so
I'll unmute. Okay, Tali, you can try to unmute yourself now.
Yeah, I just did. Thank you. I'm wondering, I think this is more a comment that I'm fascinated why she used the kingdom, because when we're thinking of, to me, I think that might, you know, in everything, even words and visually, there's an agenda or there's a statement being made by the artist. And I think the Queendom, to me, looking at Malchut, one would associate it with King David, but it's almost the feminine presence with Shekhinah. And I wonder if what she's saying, if that could be behind it by using the word queendom instead of kingdom, of the feminine coming in there.
So absolutely, and that was quite a move by her. It's an invented word also in Hebrew.
Right, it's a word, right.
And she invented it to emphasize a new telling of the history from a female, matriarchal, not necessarily linear point of view. So definitely. I'm seeing just a ton of questions. So Sophia, I'm going to kind of grab a few questions that I'm seeing here that I think are really important. So about Queendom, we kind of answered, and I'll send you more texts about that. Many of the pieces now in Israeli museums, if so, which ones? So very often, whatever exhibits in the Israeli pavilion then receives a large exhibit in an Israeli museum in the year after. So for instance, there was a large exhibition of Tzivi Geva's work in the Herzliya Museum a year after. It looks different. It's reimagined for the space. And then it depends on what museums purchase what works, yes or no, but they don't then exist in a permanent way. In the case of Ilit Azoulay, first of all, there's this amazing website that documents all of the works. Ilit lives between Berlin and Tel Aviv. I'm assuming her exhibition will travel between these spaces and many more. That happens often. Same goes for Sigalit Landau's exhibition. So they usually find a few more exhibitions
So to all of the international pavilions, like you'll see these exhibitions around the world now, whatever was in the Biennale itself.
For instance, on Monday, I'll be taking you through some of my highlights, and one of them is Anselm Kiefer, and it's already said that his exhibition will then move and be exhibited in Germany in 2023. So that's very common. I have here another question, which I like, is why is matriarchal not linear? That's a whole philosophical question. Let's just start with the fact that matriarchal and the feminine is a cycle, as it is. We live as a cycle and less as a linear. And it also connects a little to what we spoke in my first lecture about Ursula K. Le Guin, the carrier bag theory, which you have in your text. So just peep at that, because it looks at how history is told from a more male point of view and a female point of view, and I'd say between the sword and the carrier bag. And I will say these are all quite new gender theories, and a place to examine and see how you feel about these theories and are they true for you or no. But they're definitely an interesting new way to look at our world. Sophia, are there any questions?
Wendy, I see that Wendy's raised her hand, so maybe Wendy can.
I was just wondering if she's related to Guillaume Azoulay.
Not that I know. She's really, I mean,
the artist.
Yeah, the artist, Ilit Azoulay. Her brother is Sagi Azoulay. I don't know Guillaume Azoulay, so I'm not sure. Azoulay is a very big common tribe. Even in Israel, there's also an artist named Shai Azoulay, and they're actually not related. So I don't know.
At some point, he was the youngest artist exhibited in the Louvre. He does a lot of horses, and he did a series for the Kentucky Derby.
Okay, so we can check him out. I don't know if they're related. I see Dorothea here asked, please send a list of the artists so we can look. Absolutely. You'll receive a follow-up email with all the links to the artists and everyone. I think especially in this lecture, it's like each is just an open door for you to walk through and find so many more things. Yeah, is there anything else? Maybe I'll just say about Monday that on Monday it's highlights, and I think it's going to be far less information, and it's going to be more a lot of images and why I love them and how I look at art. And so a bit more personal and emotional and visual, with a little less of the politics and intellectual and cerebral sides of things. And I'm excited about it because really, I mean, what I showed you until now isn't even my highlights, right? Like there is, it's so amazing. So it's really going to be exciting to share, even though like some of the things I don't know if and how they'll come across visually. So hopefully together with my storytelling and excitement, you'll manage to get some of the feel of what it was and what it's like to be there. So yeah, so thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Shirel.
Thanks,
For your
Sophia.
excitement and all of your knowledge. And we hope to see you all on Monday for the final session.
Yes.
And then in 2 years' time, we're all going to take a trip to the Biennale together.
Yeah, it's kind of insane. Let's see. Now, these days, anyone that says in 2 years' time, it seems like the world can go around like
Yes.
3 times until then, and who knows what will be.
Who knows?
But yeah, thank you, Sophia. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Goodbye. Have a
Bye.
great day ahead.